So earlier today when we were out scouting, both Stan and I found this beautiful waterfall on the side of the road. Now, water is one of my favorite things to photograph because it allows me to capture both motion and tension, along with a little bit of atmosphere to create something unique. So we're gonna go out and check out this waterfall and see what we see. Now, one of the challenges when you're photographing in a place that's close to a town is that you have man-made elements such as the telephone poles. So what you really have to do is try to look to find those unique compositions and work around these man-made objects so that it can feel a little bit more natural. Now, sometimes you can include them in the shot if that's what you're really going for, but often for me, I'm looking for solitude in nature. Now, of all the different compositions we found, to me, this is the most interesting. You have this nice leading line of these rapids feeding up into the mountains behind it. It's gonna give us the clearest shot and the most compelling image possible. Now, let's talk about camera gear. Now, first off, I'm gonna be shooting this with a SONY a7R Mark IV to take advantage of all those 62 megapixels and high dynamic range. Now, pairing that, I have a wide angle 16-35 f2.8 G Master lens. Now, this is gonna give me a nice wide angled shot of this beautiful stream. And then it's important to talk about filters as well. Now, with filters, there are really two different filters that you can use that really can't easily be replicated when it comes to post-processing. One is a circular polarizer, like you see here. And that's essentially going to enhance or cut reflected light. Now, in this scene, we have a lot of water around these rocks. And so this polarizer can help me clean up a lot of those reflections that might become a little distracting. Now, in addition, I could use a neutral density to slow down my shutter speed to give that nice smooth look. But because it's so dark right now, we're shooting at the tail end of the day up here in the Arctic, we probably have enough light in order to slow things down to the shutter speeds that I want. So shutter speeds when it comes to water really controls everything you need to know about that idea of tension and texture, which is again why I love photographing waterfalls. So if you have a long shutter speed that's too long, it can make the image look very dreamlike, which might be the look you're going after, but for me personally, it's not something I always want to have. And instead, on the flip side, if you shoot too fast, you can freeze the water so that it becomes too artifact and too sharp. So often for me, I like to balance those two. I want motion and tension. So if I can get to a shutter speed around 0.5, 0.6 seconds, that gives me the perfect balance between the two. So with the polarizer, the low light, I think I can achieve that with this scene. Now, setting-wise, this is pretty straightforward. I'm shooting at ISO 100 to maintain maximum dynamic range, shooting around f11, which is pretty much the sharpest point of most apertures when it comes to most wide-angle lenses, and then 0.5 seconds. Because as I mentioned before, that gives me the perfect balance between motion and tension when it comes to the movement of the water. Polarizers are super important here. With that ability to cut reflected light, we can essentially make a lot of the water black, allowing the rapids to really pop and stand out in the process. This also cleans up rocks on the side, both the left and the right of the frame, making it easier to create a more simplistic and straightforward image rather than having all these distracting elements that I might have to remove in post-processing after the fact. A lot of photographers become kind of like anchors in a scene like this, where they stick on one spot and wait for the light to change. And what ends up happening is they come away with 200 or 300 images of the exact same composition. Now, that's not something I ever want to do. I want to maximize my time out here in the field and come away with a good 10, 15, maybe even 20 images that are quite unique and different, giving me multiple opportunities to figure out what I might want to do with these images after I get home. So with that being said, let's find a few new compositions on the other side of the river that allow me to get much closer to the water and still do it safely. So because we went with this low angle, we went ultra wide as we talked about, we used the polarizer to cut the reflected water out. We also want to make sure that we have a composition that allows a lot of the rest of the water to feed out through the corner of the frame, where you have a lot of water flowing into this bottom right-hand part of the frame. Looks very natural and very pleasing to the eye. Now, as we talked about, the important here is to work the scene. Just because we start off with this kind of horizontal shot looking low, I also want to see how it looks vertical, kind of looking tall, like we did with the first shot in the series. So once you've taken the shot, it's important to check sharpness, especially when I got an image that I'm really happy with. I want to look in and make sure that I got the details looking beautiful when I'm magnifying and looking in at about 100% zoom. So here on the Sonys, you can double tap, zoom in, double tap to zoom out, and it's going to give you all that beautiful detail. So it's really quite remarkable, especially when you pair it with the 16-35 wide-angle lens. It's beautiful for landscape photography. Now that we've wrapped up with this waterfall, let's talk about a few of the lessons we learned from this shoot. Now, first and foremost, definitely don't be an anchor. Learn to work the scene. Find different angles, compositions, shutter speeds, exposures, and try to maximize the most you can get out of every single time you go out shooting. Let's talk a little bit about that shutter speed. Because in this given scene, photographing the waterfall, a 0.5 to 0.6 shutter speed really gave me that perfect balance of motion and tension. So depending on if you like that dreamlike look, or maybe you want to freeze a wave crashing against the rock, It's important to start with that shutter speed that you think is going to give you the most bang for your buck when it comes to the vision you have for the scene you're trying to photograph. Now, we're here in the beautiful Lofoten Islands, and we still have plenty more to photograph, so let's see what's around the next corner. One of the most amazing things about the Lofoten Islands is not just that we're so far north that you can get some pretty amazing northern lights, but also the fact that it has some of the most amazing beaches, especially considered that we're above the Arctic Circle. So if you look here at the beach here, we're in Skogsanden, we have snow, we have mountains, but most importantly, we have these amazing patterns that you see here. Now, all these patterns formed in the sand create some of the most dynamic foregrounds that I have seen pretty much anywhere out there in the world. So even on a day like this, where it's a little bit rainy, it can be great to come out here, capture some of this stormy weather, and get some of these patterns here in the foregrounds. So let's go ahead and try to make that happen. For landscape photographers, it's all too easy to always reach for our wide-angle zooms, especially our ultra-wides. We always want to capture so much of the scene, and sometimes we rely on those ultra-wide zooms as almost like a crutch. So in situations like this, it can be fun to bring out one of your prime lenses. Now, in addition to the 16-35, which I love again because it's super wide, you can get really close to subjects, I'm actually really enjoying using the SONY 20mm f1.8 lens here. Now, I think something about it is just at 20mm, it's wide enough to still get a lot of good foreground elements, but the details are so sharp and crisp, and it has so much light coming into the image sensor because of the lens, that it's just so much fun to play with. Now, after we've captured some of the close-ups of these foreground elements, I want to actually go a little bit higher and change my perspective. Now, here at Skogsanden, we have this beautiful little stream flowing out from the snowmelt out towards the ocean, giving us a really nice leading line in the process. Now, right above it, you have the beautiful mountain here behind it. So if I use the right polarizer, get to the right perspective, it might be able to create a really great leading line throughout the frame, which is more pleasing to the eye and gives the viewer more excuses to look through your entire frame. So a really important accessory when you're photographing either in the rain or you're near a waterfall with a lot of spray is a rocket blower. Now, these things are great because it pushes out air through the little opening here in the front, allowing you to push water off of your lens. Now, the benefit of this versus a microfiber is that it doesn't kind of mush that water around your frame, giving you more blur and sometimes out of focus results. Now, I hope you really enjoyed our two scenes we looked at that are most commonly found out here in the Lofoten Islands. Now, first we talked about the waterfall, using leading lines and picking very specific shutter speeds to give us the type of look we want for the motion in the water. In addition, we talked about using foreground elements on some of the beaches out here in Lofoten, allowing yourself to use those wide-angle lenses or even some of your wide primes in order to get some really interesting images using vertical orientation and shooting top-down. So that's it we have for this video. But next up, we have Stan talking about time-lapse photography and teaching you guys how to photograph and capture the northern lights in the skies above. We hope you enjoy, so stay tuned for the next video coming soon.